Well, hello, welcome. I'm Alla Efimova, and
I am Terri Cohn.
over the next few weeks, we're recording a number of conversations with artists, scholars, and curators about Sonya Rapoport's magnum opus, a project called Objects on My Dresser. We're decoding, deciphering, interpreting, and probing this fascinating, seminal, yet still little understood work. Rapoport is a key figure in American conceptual art, interactive performance, digital media, and net art. We've written about her work, curated exhibitions, researched the archives, and came to believe that Object on My Dresser holds the key to the rest of Rapoport's complex, layered multimedia work. And here we are, working on the book, talking to our colleagues, and sharing these conversations with all of you. Today, October 6th, would have been Rapoport's 96th birthday, which we're honoring by releasing the first episode of this video blog. So what is this enigmatic work that many have heard about, but few begin to understand? Between 1979 and 1983, Rapoport collaborated with psychiatric social worker Winifred DeVos on analyzing and interpreting the personal significance of 28 objects that accumulated on her tansu, a bedroom dresser. The analysis, recorded and at times made public, can be considered as therapy at the time when the artist was mourning the loss of her mother. The complex web of associations between the objects, which were souvenirs, trinkets, personal photos, and mementos, and image and word associations developed into a web of meanings that Rapoport externalized into a kind of self-portrait. Imagine turning your own psychotherapy sessions into a set of exhibitions, publications, and interactive performances in public spaces and art galleries, and also drawing audiences into that process. So Objects on My Dresser unfolded over 4 years in what Rapoport called 11 phases or iterations, which we have now researched and documented. But the artist kept returning to the key images and methods developed during this period for the rest of her life, nearly 40 years. In fact, the last phase was also the final work she made in 2015, the year she died at the age of 91. Exhibited after her death at Crowswork Gallery in Oakland and curated by its director, Jasmine Moorhead. This 12th phase, called the Transitive Property of Equality, was also Rapoport's last collaborative project involving two people we're going to talk to today, and Lesley Selcer and Farley Gwazda. So welcome to both of you. And Lesley Selcer is a widely published art writer and poet. She was an artist in residence at Crowswork along with Sonya Rapoport. She received a BA in Writing, Literature, and Visual Criticism from Evergreen State College, an MA in English from Simon Fraser University, and an MFA from California College of the Arts. Farley Gwazda is the director of Worth Writer Gallery at UC Berkeley. He's a practicing artist and has been the director of the Sonya Rapoport Legacy Trust since 2015. Gwazda worked with Rapoport as her studio assistant, as was responsible for implementing the Transitive Property of Equality at Crowswork, according to the artist's instructions.
Thank you, Alla. The Transitive Property of Equality was a 12th phase of, or iteration, as Alla said, of Objects on My Dresser, makes use of short phrases from Lesley Selcer's 2014 poem, The Natural World. The phrases are collaged onto selected pages from the New York Times and matched with original objects from Rapoport's dresser that were reintroduced for the first time since 1979. The personal associations created among the ready-made images in the newspaper ads, objects, and words from Selcer's poem are critical to understanding the work. The interactive, participatory aspect is activated here. Viewers selected an object and matched it with a poetic phrase and a page from the New York Times, then recorded their choice by placing a colored glass bead in a grid. So, with that brief sort of description, I'd like to ask each of you some questions about this last phase of Objects on My Dresser. Farley, I'd like to start with you. Can you talk about the title of this last phase of Objects on My Dresser?
Of course, it refers to a mathematical idea, which in one of the drawings that one of Sonya's notes that we displayed in the exhibition stated, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. So it's a almost self-evident mathematical truth. And I think that Sonya was interested in this idea, partially because she was studying the history of very early computer art and was interested in coding and mathematics. But perhaps being an artist and a highly visual person, she was attracted to the fact that it had a kind of a three-part structure, A, B, and C. She had set up three different sets of symbols, which were her objects on my dresser, 26 of those, and the 26 phrases from Lesley Selcer's poem, and 26 pages from the New York Times. This was actually, I think, her third project that would use the New York Times pages as the substrate on which to make her art.
Can you talk a little more about how you worked with Sonya on the project?
Sonya, when she died, had left notes, which I actually just dug out of a box, which recorded which phrase and which New York Times page and which object went together, and had given me some basic instructions for how to install the exhibition. Of course, there were some decisions that I had to make along the way, along with Jasmine Moorhead, who is running the residency in the gallery. But I think that the final form of the Transitive Property of Equality was really strongly Sonya's vision.
Mm-hmm.
It really was such an intense experience for me, and it seems like it was for Lesley as well, just heightened by the fact that Sonya had passed away so suddenly and unexpectedly before being able to finish the project.
And I guess that brings me to the last kind of introductory question I wanted to ask you, which was about the participatory aspect of the work. Maybe you can talk about the grid that you created for the Crow's Work Show.
Yeah, so a lot of Sonya's projects, going back to the earliest iterations of Objects on My Dresser in 1979, and including a lot of her interactive installations in the early 80s, involved having viewers interact with the artwork, and usually the responses were recorded, whether it was by computer, as she did a lot earlier on, or whether Sonya was just taking notes. So the final form of the project, we actually had viewers walk in, and I also found a direction sheet. They would choose a bead, which was in front of an image of one of her objects on the dresser, and then place it actually in a scientific apparatus, almost like a Petri dish, and place the bead in a grid corresponding to their favorite New York Times page and the phrase from Lesley Selcer's poem that they felt best matched the image and the object. So what we ended up with is a grid, kind of this multi-dimensional grid that reflected the viewer's way of seeing the world, which is something that harkens back to the beginning of Objects on My Dresser, in that it was based in her own psychoanalytic experience. And Sonya's interest in the viewers was always based on understanding their psychology or their personality through the choices that they made.
This seems like a natural segue to talking with you and Lesley, because you helped create that work. You were, I guess, collaborators. Would you say that in the work that you did?
We were surprised collaborators because I didn't find out the work was being made until several weeks before it went up. I met Sonya at my artist talk. I was the first resident in Jasmine's residency program, which had one artist at a time inhabit the gallery for a month and make new work or present their work. So Sonya came to my talk and we met, and I happened to read that poem because I had made just very small minor video work based on a line from that poem, and had explained how sort of toggling back and forth between the idea for a visual work and a line and a poem. And apparently that's what caught Sonya's attention, according to Jasmine. So I found out like weeks before the show opened that she had used my poem, and I walked in and felt that it was all I had ever wanted for my poetry.
How do you understand the significance of Objects on My Dresser relative to this kind of intimate connection that you and Sonya had with this last phase?
Well, I understood it at first glance as very playful and almost Kabbalistic in its tone, in the way that it was connecting colors, words, and images. And in spending more time thinking about Sonya's work after seeing the exhibition at San Jose and doing some critical thinking and critical writing about her whole career, what became apparent to me was the intensely feminist aspect of her work. I'm not sure how to tie this in, but one comment is the full title is actually The Natural World Frozen. So I think that's like an important difference, because the poem was really, well, it's doing a lot of things, but one of the things it's doing is mourning the transformation of the actual world into like reified objects and names and language and information. And I think although Sonya was completely fascinated with and working within this realm to make a third thing, I think she had the same, essentially the same position to the world of objectivity. And I feel like finding this third way between science and art, or in my case, especially at the time, between language and image, is this really fertile ground? And I'm not sure how to answer your question. I mean, but my reaction was like I said, it was like I had a reaction of fulfillment. And I think the reason was I had been working critically and creatively with thinking about the language and a language and the image. What's the difference? How are they similar? And the book that this poem goes on to be part of is all about that.
Well, thank you both. This was really illuminating.